We're learning new details today about one of Trump's federal cases involving the trove of classified documents he stowed in the bathroom and the ballroom and anywhere else he could of his Florida resort and refused to give back to the government for a year. NBC News has confirmed reporting that the former president was warned months in advance by his attorney, Evan Corcoran, that Mar-a-Lago could be searched by the FBI if he didn't comply with the grand jury subpoena. This was first reported by ABC News, which obtained the transcript of a series of voice memos Corcoran recorded on his own phone, including one where he reportedly says that minutes after that meeting with Trump, another lawyer warned him that, quote, Trump would go ballistic if Corcoran pushed him to comply with the subpoena, and that there's no way he's going to agree to anything, and that he was going to deny that there were any more boxes at all. Which, spoiler alert, is basically what ended up happening. NBC News has not seen these transcripts or heard the audio. Joining me now to discuss is Paul Butler, former federal prosecutor, law professor at Georgetown University, and MSNBC legal analyst. Paul, so I'll start with this. I think it's very interesting that you have a news outlet that got access to notes that a lawyer took about his client. It's not necessarily a violation of attorney-client privilege, but where does this fall into the sort of legal haze? Because I don't know if that's a violation. I don't know if that's something that could be used in other sorts of indictments. Where's this play?
So we know that Jack Smith was able to get this testimony from Evan Corcoran. Corcoran was Trump's lawyer, and typically the attorney-client privilege will protect all of their communications. But a federal judge ruled that Donald Trump tried to use Corcoran, his own lawyer, to further a criminal scheme.
Okay.
And for that reason, the judge allowed the privilege between the attorney and the client to be breached. And thus, Jack Smith has access to this gold mine of evidence. Jason, this is not a typical case when the prosecutor has very incriminating evidence from the defendant's own defense lawyer. It's not only incriminating, it's especially credible.
Yeah, I mean, this is different than sort of, you catch a cheating spouse, hand me your phone. I mean, this is a guy's lawyer. He's obviously taking contemporaneous notes of the things that he has. How unprecedented is this? I mean, I've not heard of something like this where the defense attorney is basically like, yeah, take my phone because this guy tried to get me involved in a criminal conspiracy.
Especially when you think about the evidence that phone contained. Extraordinarily incriminating remarks from Trump. He said at one point, I don't want anybody looking through my boxes. And he specifically said to his lawyer, Corcoran, I don't want you looking through the boxes. He said, what happens if we just say that we don't have any documents? Jason, that's not smoking gun. That's almost a confession. Again, this is vital to the government's case for both the espionage charge and the obstruction charge related to the classified documents. They have to prove criminal intent, Trump's willful state of mind that he knew that he was breaking the law. All of this evidence corroborates that.
So help me out here, because what is the line at which a lawyer would potentially do something like this? Because, hey, you're talking to your client. Let's say it's a criminal trial, right? I could be talking to my client. Maybe he's a mobster. He's like, you know what, if we could just make the cops disappear, something like that. People say things in attorney-client. How far does it have to go for the attorney to be like, hey, I can't have this conversation anymore, or anything else you say at this point, I have to turn it over? What's that line generally in a legal case?
So I think when Corcoran was taking these contemporary notes, he was thinking of two things. One, he was just being a good defense attorney.
Right.
He was going to have a lot of meetings with Trump. Trump famously says different things depending on the time of the day it is. So he just wanted a record. The other thing for any Trump lawyer, CY butt. Cover your butt,
yes.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because he knows what kind of client this is. For example, Corcoran told Trump, I don't care what you say. If I attest to the court that I've looked for these documents, I'm going to look for the documents. I'm going to come back 2 weeks, and I'm going to look in that storage room, which is where Trump had told him all of the documents were. But we now know within that time, Trump directed 2 of his employees to move that stuff out of the storage room, which is why the indictment charges that Trump knowing and intentionally lied, not only to the FBI, but to his own lawyer, Evan Corcoran. Check this out. If it couldn't get any more wild, Corcoran is likely to be a witness for the prosecution in the Mar-a-Lago case. he's still defending Trump in the January 6th prosecution.
Yeah, this is interesting. I can't imagine a more ridiculous example of the worst client for anybody to have one way or another. And I have to ask you, because I always think this is important just from a legal standpoint, you know, just put yourself in a lawyer's brain. I get that there's money involved, but why would anyone, you know, Trump is going to get other lawyers. He burns through lawyers all the time. Why does anyone want to work with a guy who seems like he's always going to get you in trouble?
So we can answer that generally. Everybody who's accused has the right to an excellent defense lawyer. It's good news that finally Trump has some lawyers who know what they're doing.
Right.
Defense attorneys, they like risk, they like problematic clients, but they don't like clients who act against their own interests. And so I think the biggest problem that Trump's defense team will have with him is his constantly going on TV and blabbing, which is not only a violation of the orders of the judges in the
Right.
4 cases in which he's prosecuted, it's just not in his best interest. So you have a client who's trying to go to jail, it looks like.
Right. It's like he's committed to screwing up his own case. Speaking of a case where no one screwed up, I actually think justice was done. We got former Proud Boys leader Enrique Tarrio. He got 22 years for his part in the January 6th insurrection. Now, look, this is not something that saddens most Americans who are concerned about democracy. Enrique Tarrio had a long history of working with the Proud Boys. They are a white nationalist organization. They're dangerous. He got a longer sentence than almost anybody else. I want you to sort of take us back. What do you think is that now setting a precedent, right? If he gets 22 years, does that mean as these cases go further up the ladder, because he's just a foot soldier, right?
Yes.
He is a pawn. Does this mean that if a member of Congress or higher level people, that they're likely to get at least 22 years? Or is this something that you think was just specific to him and sort of the Proud Boys organization?
So not legally significant in the sense that when a judge sentences someone, she's not creating any legal precedent, so that's not binding the judge in other sentences. But judges do like what's called proportionality. That is, they like to treat similar cases alike. And when someone's more culpable, they want that person to be punished more. By the end of this year, 2,000 people will have been prosecuted in relation to January 6th. The vast majority, the foot soldiers, the so-called MAGA tourists who just showed up at the Capitol, can't say just because what they did was extraordinary, but moving up the chain. So Enrique Tarrio, maybe not like a line soldier, maybe more like an officer, but not a general. The generals we know are people like Giuliani,
Right.
John Eastman, Sidney Powell, and Donald Trump. And certainly a judge will have to think in sentencing any of those people, can I really give the people who organized, financed, and led this insurrection less time than I gave the people who just carried out their criminal will?
Paul Butler, I love talking to you because I always feel smarter. Thank you so much for joining us tonight on The Readout.